Welcome, everyone. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate that you have good navigation skills so that you could find your way back here. And I appreciate your interest in academic and research career options. My name is David Damari. I happen to be the Dean at Michigan College of Optometry, Ferris State University. And welcome to this session that Dr. Kelly Nichols put together, thank you, on exploring your options in, academic and research careers. Anyway, we have a great panel for you here today, just a phenomenal panel. If you put together all the academic and research experience that these four people bring to the table, I don't know how many hundreds of studies and years it would be, but it's really formidable, I guess would be the best word. So let's start farthest to my right, your left. We've got Mark Bullimore, who is going to be in, 2 hours? The Dean of Southern California College of Optometry at Morris B. Ketchum University. We have Barbara Caffrey, who's, Caffrey, sorry, I always want to put a T in there, sorry. Caffrey, who is at Western Toronto?
Toronto Western Hospital.
Toronto Western. I have reversal problems, in case you couldn't tell. Toronto Western University Hospital, and runs the Sjogren Institute there. We have Dr. Jeff Hualien, who is at the Ohio State University in Columbus. And we have Dr. Kelly Nichols, who is the Dean at University of Alabama, Birmingham College of Optometry. Dr. Nichols asked me to talk a little bit about my research career. I am an excellent consumer of research. And honestly, I haven't done a lot of research in my career, but the importance of research to my career, I don't think I could overstate. Every clinical decision I make, I try to make it be informed by the best evidence that's out there. And most of our best evidence in optometry comes from optometry. Honestly, I don't care what field you're talking about. Of course, in vision therapy, which happens to be my specialty, in the burgeoning area of neurorehabilitation and brain injury, all the best research is optometry related, from the Stelmax groundbreaking research that's got to be over 10 years ago now on the effect of concussion on accommodation and vergence. And that's out of a VA hospital, by the way, to the current time. But even in the areas of disease, dry eye syndrome, you name it, optometry research is of the highest quality and really guides clinical practice to this day, and always will. And so it's very, very important. It's important as an academician, it's important as a researcher, it's important as a clinician. And so what we're hoping to do today is to get you to really think about contributing to that rich history and contributing to the future of this profession by carving your own path in academics and research. And I love this quote that Kelly provided for me, partly because it's from Abigail Adams, who we all know was really the second president of the United States. Learning is not attained by chance. It must be sought for with ardor and diligence. And that's true. But the good news is there's people like this panel and like some of the people I see sitting in the audience who are very willing to help you with that ardor and that diligence as mentors. So I beg you to use that. Enjoy the discussion from the panel today. And with that, I'm actually going to let the people who know what they're talking about talk.
Thank you for the lovely introduction of all of us. He forgot to introduce this video that ASCO has just put together.
Right?
Let's see if we can get to play.
As an optometrist, you get to directly help individual patients on a day-to-day basis, which of course we find very rewarding. But as a researcher, you get to help patients on a more global scale, which I think is really fulfilling.
I think one of the most rewarding things about a career in research is I get to be an expert in a particular area. And that has sort of afforded me the ability to be able to travel the world and talk about that particular area. So I've been to Australia, China, Hong Kong, all over the world just to talk to people about the research that I do.
Research sort of keeps me on the cutting edge of information, and so I think it really informs my interactions with my patients. So when I see patients in private practice, I can honestly say that I feel like I'm up to date on the most recent information and that I can educate them well and trust kind of what I'm saying because, there was a new study last month that just came out. But also interactions with patients inform my decisions on what I decide to research. So I think it's just a really nice relationship and kind of keeps me connected to both sides in a positive way.
The most rewarding thing is seeing your graduates excel, whether they're out in private practice or they become a faculty member somewhere else. Those are the greatest rewards. We think the greatest obstacle for graduates who are interested in research is financial.
So the NIH has a loan repayment program that is open to clinicians and therefore open to ODs who would want to do it. And they might get all of their optometry school debt forgiven over a number of years. The other thing that people often don't realize about graduate school is you don't pay tuition for graduate school. In fact, you work during graduate school. So in our system at Ohio State, they teach in our clinic or they're a teaching assistant for labs. We pay them a stipend, which also covers their tuition. And so that's how we fund graduate education.
If anybody is even mildly considering the opportunity of going into academia and going into research, I'd encourage them to seriously look at it because I can tell you from my own experience, it's about the best career one can have. I get to go into the lab whatever I want and do whatever I want and answer questions that are really exciting to me. So I don't know how you color that, but it's good.
So what you get to do is you get to choose basically what you do in terms of research. So if you enjoy doing ocular disease, you can do research in ocular disease. If you enjoy doing epidemiology, you can do that. So really, it's anything you want it to be.
I think instead what we need in optometry is people across a broad portfolio of areas, ranging from immunology to pediatrics and perhaps everything in between, because the eye, even though it's this little 1-inch sized organ, is this incredibly complex window into the soul, and all those fields can impact what we can learn about eyes and vision and how we might change patient care in the future.
I didn't know if it did anything after that. Well, this is a new video, and thanks to the ASCO staff who organized putting this together and a few on the stage who were part of it. And if you want to see it again, it's now at all those places, and you can go to the website and you can share it with your faculty or your friends. How we're going to do this now is each of us is going to take 5 minutes to tell you about our path. And I'm going to try and really stick to that. And then we each then have a question that we'll answer that came up from one of the 2 previous times we've done this seminar at the Academy meeting through questions and concerns or things that have been noted in the surveys. So hopefully that will be meaningful for you too. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jeff Hualien, who you just heard a minute ago on the video, who's going to tell us about his path.
All right, well, welcome. Thank you for coming. I really hope we are all able to help stimulate sort of an interest in academia, because it is really an important part of optometry. Obviously, we're teaching the future. We're advancing our profession through research, so I congratulate you on even considering it at this stage. Part of the reason I say that is I think you'll hear a story that will be consistent throughout this is very few people go into optometry school realizing that they ultimately want to become a teacher of optometry or a research scientist in optometry. It's almost always during your optometry sort of academic career that you figure out that that's the area that interests you. So my story started during the summer between my first and second year of optometry school, where I got to participate in a sort of a summer research job funded by the National Eye Institute, which allowed me to do research with Dr. Zadnik. And I'll tell you what sort of stimulated me was that summer, I had a huge data set that I got to work with, and I was using Excel, teaching myself Excel, and I remember setting up the Excel spreadsheet so that ultimately I'd be able to push a button and answers would come out. And I still to this day remember that exact moment. I was waiting, getting everything set up so I could push a button, and the answers came out, and I could not have been more excited. And that is really what stimulated the rest of my career, was that one very small moment. But from there, I eventually knew that I wanted to go into academia. But I knew I didn't want to tell my parents that I wanted to go into academia. They thought I'd gone to school way too long already, and they thought he'll never graduate. So I waited until literally a couple weeks before graduation. I said, Mom, Dad, I think I'm going to go to graduate school. And they said, well, we're not going to pay for your health insurance anymore. I said, you haven't paid for my health insurance in years. I said, we're not going to make your car payments anymore. I said, you haven't paid for that in years. I said, are you interested in all what I want to do? And they weren't. So what I did is I spent the next several years showing them what I was doing, and eventually they got excited about my career, almost as excited as I am. So it really was a long process. But it took me to Ohio State, where I had to get a master's degree, but I knew ultimately that I wanted to get a PhD degree. So I got my PhD through that. At that time, my interest was in quality of life. It was a burgeoning area. I wanted to create some surveys. And at that same time, National Eye Institute was also having a professional create those surveys. So I sort of gave up in that area, but at the same time, I got the opportunity to work with kids, which is something I love to do and had done previously. And in doing so, I started fitting kids with contact lenses, led to myopia control, led to trying to push that age back at which we'd be comfortable fitting kids with contact lenses, and that's where I've spent the rest of my research career. So it wasn't something that I thought I was going to do from the beginning, but it is something that has led to what I can't consider, I can't even consider something that I think is more fun. I'm now the Associate Dean for Research at the OSU College of Optometry. I love the research part of it. I love the administrative part of it. I love the teaching part of it. It's all good.
Let's see who's next. So Jeff actually wins the award for being at the single institution for the longest period of time on this stage. I don't know if you know that, yeah?
Yeah. So I'm Mark Bullimore, and I actually had the pleasure of interacting with two of my colleagues on stage at a very young age, since we were in the same class at one time or another. I was in front of them and they were paying attention, I think. But I'm a British-trained optometrist. I did my PhD in England, and in '88 I came to Berkeley to work with Ian Bailey, who kind of reinvented the ladder chart. I then spent 15 years at Ohio State, and the last 6 years I've been kind of a free agent, being a consultant, doing a little teaching here and there, but as was implied, that I've just joined the Southern California College of Optometry, which is proof that if we open enough optometry schools, any fool can be dean. So I want to sort of share two things with you. The first goes back to high school, and being English trained, we go straight from high school into law, dentistry, medicine, optometry, vet med. We don't do this 4-year liberal arts BS, BA, whatever it is. So when I was towards the end of high school, I was talking with my physics teacher, who was also my sort of, what do you want to call him, my homeroom teacher, my personal tutor, if you like. And he said, I think you made a good decision, Mark. What are you going to do when you graduate from optometry? I said, well, I'll join a practice, open a practice. And he said, how many people go and do research and teaching? And I was quite proud. I knew the answer. I said, I think it's about 5%. And he said, do you think that's something you'd be interested in? I said, nah. And I always tell that story. I've told it to kindergarteners. I've told it to graduate students, because that was somebody who saw something inside of me that I was clueless about. So who knows what the future holds. I've had the fortune of working with a lot of different people who are interested in a lot of different things. Some people might call it research ADHD, but one of the advantages that I enjoy is when I'm surrounded by talented students and colleagues, somebody will come to a meeting and we'll come here to get our batteries recharged. Somebody might come to a meeting and say, hey, could we do a project on this? And Jason Nichols, relation, and Matt Marsich were a couple of third-year students who said, we want to do something on overnight orthokeratology. And this was back in 1998. And it's like, okay, let's set up a protocol. Let's get Joe Barr to help us with some lenses. We did it. It wasn't a degree-earning project for either of them. They were just fascinated. I was interested. We facilitated, and we produced a very impactful paper. So if you have that same level of curiosity, maybe you're still trying to figure out what you're about, then maybe this is something you should look at a little closer. 3 minutes. Who's next?
So Mark, it's Barbara next, but Mark wins the award for coming from the furthest to start his research career. Over the pond.
I'm probably the closest to ending it.
Hello, my name is Barbara Caffrey, and I'm the person that really doesn't belong on this stage, but I'm going to tell you my story anyway. I am an optometrist who works in private practice. I also work in a Sjogren's syndrome clinic in a local hospital, and I also work in a specialty contact lens clinic in the Kensington Eye Institute in downtown Toronto. But basically, I am an optometrist who sees patients all day long and who has what I call an itchy brain. I cannot stand doing the same thing all day, every day, without realizing that half the stuff I'm saying and doing, we don't really have any science behind. And that's the kind of thing that makes me want to go and learn and study and research. And that's why I've combined the two while being basically a private practitioner. So what I did was I graduated from the New England College of Optometry, and the lucky thing about that was it was in Boston, of course, and the Corbs were there, and the academy was held there a couple of times while I was going to school. So what happened was I became the server of drinks and the cleaner-upper of dishes at the Corbs house when they invited all the big academy people over. And what I realized when I went to the academy and served as a monitor, etc., is that I wanted to be one of these people that stood in front of a poster and told people what they had researched. I wanted to be somebody who stood up in front of the crowd and actually gave a lecture about something that they have discovered themselves. And so that's where I started with my inspiration. So as I practiced and practiced and practiced and then got divorced and practiced and practiced and practiced and then got divorced again, along the way, I got an itchy brain every so often. And my itchy brain came when I thought to myself, wow, I had 3 glasses of red wine last night. I can hardly open my eyes this morning. They're so dry. So what's that all about? And that made me wonder about nutrition and dry eye. So what did I do? I found a place where there was a satellite school at the local Toronto General Hospital out of the University of Bridgeport, and I took my master's in nutrition over the weekends and the years that you do that. And there wasn't so much online, but it was kind of online. And my thesis basically was published in OVS about, does what you eat have anything to do with how you cry? So that went along for a while, and then I could at least stand up in front of people or present posters that I had a part in, and that was great. And then I practiced and practiced and practiced, and by then I'd only had 2 divorces. And I decided that clinical research was a very important thing and that I should do more. And in order to do more, I realized I needed to know more. And that's when I decided that the University of Waterloo is a place where I could do my PhD. So I had found my way into the Sjogren's Syndrome Clinic at the Western Hospital in Toronto. And that meant I got to work with rheumatology, with ENT people, because they're the ones that do the salivary gland biopsy on these patients, with ophthalmology, and I fell in love with rheumatology. If I had to do it over, I'd be a rheumatologist. It's the most interesting job in the world as far as I can tell. And so when I was teaching these residents in rheumatology, what I did when it came to autoimmune disease in the eye, they went crazy. You mean you can see this right in front of you? I'd put fluorescein in the eye and they'd say, oh my God, we have to intuit what's happening with all these joints and inner things that are going on. And you can actually see what's happening. And I sort of realized the benefit of that, the beauty of that as an optometrist, I can see what I'm looking at all day long without even having to image anything. And that's when I decided a PhD was important. So I started back to school and I worked and I went to school and I worked and I went to school and finally completed my PhD in Sjogren's syndrome. So what I want you to know is, you don't have to be part of a faculty your whole life. You can be partly part of a faculty. You can have a private practice. You can do all of those things and keep yourself doing research, because it keeps your brain from being too itchy and it makes every patient the possibility of being a subject. And that transforms everything.
Which is exactly why I invited her to be on this stage. There's no timeline for when you choose to do this. It can come right now. You all might be interested in a research career, and it may be 10, 15 years from now. And whenever that happens, it's the right time. I also went to Berkeley, and I went to school in Southern California at UC San Diego for undergrad. And that was, 4 years, got done, felt like I was studying the whole time. Went to Berkeley, and in the first year, Patsy Harvey, who taught public health, was giving a lecture, and she was trying to convince the class that it would be a good idea, if you wanted to go on and get an additional degree, that you should just go ahead and do it right after optometry school, otherwise you might not. And I leaned over famously, actually, to my roommate Amanda, and I said, there is not a chance I'm ever going to go to any more school. Famous last words, and lots of degrees later, I guess at some point I realized that I liked the variety and was interested in the options that being in academics could provide. It was sort of the opposite of why I decided to go to optometry school, which was to be in a nice practice that was quiet and calm and still medical with no blood. But that sounded to me like it was going to be routine and non-interesting. Now, when I listened to Dr. Caffrey's scenario, I think that no matter who you are, if you have the research bug, it will bite you whatever setting you're in. But at the time, I thought, well, maybe I should try more school. And so I decided to first go and do a residency, because I always loved the back of the eye as my first love. When I was in my residency, I took all the fundus photos at the residence. I just loved retina. I thought it was so cool, all the fluorescein photos. I sent off all the pictures, slides at the time to the doctors that referred. And I couldn't really, I wasn't at all thinking about research really for the first half of the year. And then at the last half of the year, I was kind of trying to decide, should I go and try and get a job or maybe go back to graduate school? And I was lured to Ohio State University at the same time that Jeff went. And so we became compatriots, I guess, in school, but I still didn't know what I was going to do yet. I had done a lot of dry eye also, but it was sort of a secondary thing during my residency. I wasn't really thinking of that as a research option. In fact, I had started down the road with a different project on congenital cataract, and it just wasn't sinking in. I was trying, but it wasn't the project for me. And I kept coming back to this paper that I had discovered when I was in my residency called the NEI Industry Report on Clinical Trials in Dry Eye. Now, there were two optometrists that were part of this panel that put together this paper, one of which on the stage with me. became my hero. You don't know this, but I thought I saw her name on the page. She was one of two out of a whole bunch of PhD and MDs that were part of this group that put together this white paper on dry eye. And it read like a roadmap to what your career and research could be like, because there were so many unanswered questions. I dog-eared it and highlighted it, and the original copy of the paper that I had became torn up. And so I went one day to Joe Barr's office and asked him if I could borrow the journal, because back then they were paper, you could hold it. He gave it to me, and to this day, that journal issue lives in my file cabinet to this day with the original paper in there, because it was so instrumental to me. I think Don Korb was the only other optometrist, is that right? So clearly, in the Academy's eyes, mentors in our field for sure. So at Ohio, I got what I call letter soup. On the way to getting a PhD, I realized I had taken enough courses in the Master's in Public Health program that why not just do a project and finish that one out as well. And I did. I was awarded a research training grant from the NIH, which was really wonderful at the time. LRP, as you saw in the video, as Carla mentioned, really helped to reduce my debt. And TLF, do you know what that stands for? True Love Forever. I found my sweetie there. Married my spouse, and we have been married obviously since then, and we both do research kind of in the same area. Certainly Dr. Jason Nichols is his name. And we have 2 kids. So we're all in the same family here. Then I went to Houston for a few years, and I said stops in Australia. I've been fortunate to work with a group in Australia, so go to the Sydney party tonight, or the Australia party tonight. Great folks around the world that you can find opportunities to collaborate with or spend some time there if you're willing to go and try it out. To end on that, I have a lot of mentors. They come in all shapes and sizes, so I encourage all of you to find yours and tell them and ask them anything that you want to be able to ask them about while you're in this stage, and they'd love to hear from you. All right, a few questions. One of the most common questions that we heard last time was, why get an extra degree? What will that award you in the end? What will get you if I'm going to spend the time and effort? And Dr. Hualien is going to address that.
As Associate Dean for Research, this is a question I try to answer for students all the time, because like I said, almost nobody goes into optometry school thinking I'm going to do academic, and have an academic career. So I need to impart to them, that there is something that can benefit you in extending your academic career a little bit longer, and actually doing research or teaching in optometry. You have no idea what kind of doors will be opened by an additional degree. It can be a master's degree or it can be a PhD. And the reason is because you have no idea where your career is ultimately going to take you at this point. You think you do. We all thought we did, but you ultimately don't. And if you have one of these advanced degrees beyond optometry, there's just many more routes that you can have. So, for example, you may ultimately end up seeing patients on a regular basis where these degrees can, for example, give you an advantage when you're applying for a clinical position. So it may be that you want to teach optometry, and if you want to be a clinical instructor in optometry or a clinical didactic teacher, this will get you in the door at an optometry school. Or if you're applying even in a private practice job, everybody graduates from optometry. Some people do residencies, so a lot of people have those same qualifications. But if you're one of the few who goes on to get an advanced degree also, you're a step above them and you are more likely to get chosen for that job. Second thing it might open up is industry research. It's something that many of us don't think about. If you, though, consider industry, the contact lens industry, for example, there are new products coming out all the time. And it's not just that they find a piece of plastic, try it on the eye, and hope it works. There's a lot of research that goes into each one of these products. As a matter of fact, years worth of research, millions of dollars worth of research. And you could be part of that. You can be part of helping to advance the practice in optometry by being part of industry research. Or along those same lines, you might go into sort of medical affairs in industry, where when you have a product in industry, you can only say certain things about that. You have to have proof that what you're saying about your product is true. And that's what medical affairs does. So they not only help guide some of the research, but they interpret the research and allow people to say certain things about their products so that they can accurately tell people out in the world what your product is all about. You may want to become a faculty member. I don't think any of us really knew we wanted to be faculty members early on. And I can tell you that being a faculty member is the greatest job possible. Part of the reason is the freedom that you have as a faculty member. You get to guide your career. If there's a particular area of interest that you have, you can help guide your career, so that's where you spend most of your time, and that's what makes it fun. Working with students keeps you abreast, keeps you motivated, and gives you energy all the time. You can sort of thrive off that energy from the young people around you at all possible opportunities. And so it may sort of lead to you becoming a faculty member and sort of having what I think is the best career possible. And then definitely none of us ever think about being an administrator. But like I said earlier, I absolutely love my job, even the administrative part of it. I think a lot of people would never consider that. But once you're there, you get to influence what happens in the future of the profession in many different ways. Not only do you get to help influence, you get to help hopefully educate students as to possible career options, but you get to be part of optometry in general and guide where it may go. An example of that is these disruptive technologies. Should optometry fight against these disruptive technologies, or should we start to use them to our advantage? As an administrator, you can be part of that conversation and help guide where optometry will ultimately go. So those are the kinds of things that advanced degrees can get for you that just an OD degree alone may not get for you by itself. So like I said, I don't know what kind of doors it'll open for you, but I can guarantee you it will open some doors.
Hope I'm next. So I get, do you want to introduce me? No. The question I was given was about finding that job. And to continue sort of what I said earlier, the proliferation of institutions and optometry programs has provided anybody interested in an academic job with unparalleled opportunities. We wring our hands about new programs watering down the applicant pool among students, but it's having the same effect on faculty. So this is a growth industry. But I think regardless of the institution one ends up at or auditions, it's important that remember that you're an academician and you have a responsibility to your institution and the profession to really advance the academic side of optometry and vision in general. In terms of auditioning institutions, you need to find out what the right fit is. How interested is your institution in supporting what you do? So regardless of funding, I understand at SCCO we have 4 FTEs available for bid amongst faculty for release time for doing research. So it's important to find out whether there's an opportunity for protected research time at the institution. I would say the single most important factor when you're looking at opportunities, and I've even mid and late career, I've asked myself this time and time again, who in this institution looks like me and who do I aspire to be? Fellow travelers are important, mentors are vital. The reason Jeff and Kelly have been so very successful is because they had a fabulous mentor and an excellent environment of many fellow travelers and people who are excited about what they're doing that really help move them forward. Now, they're independently talented as well, but I think that's an important thing. A number of people, Carla on the video, Kelly in her slides mentioned loan repayment programs. Look at that. Some institutions also have more modest loan repayment programs. And finally, remember, nothing's forever. A number of my younger colleagues, Catherine Richdale, Wendy Harrison, have started off in one institution and then recently moved to another, where there's maybe more opportunities, maybe it's more in tune with their talents, maybe there's just simply more money. I don't know. But I've never been divorced, never been married. But I have left one country and 3 institutions. So it's not a job for life. And like in so many fields, if you want to move up and stay vitalized, you sometimes need to move somewhere else, and in my case, even step away from academia for a period of time. So.
Right. And Barbara.
So I'm back to me and being a clinician as well as a researcher. So my first sentence here is true. My patients think I'm a genius. It's just amazing. And the reason they think I'm a genius is because they know I do research, and the reason they know I do research is because I talk about it. I talk because I'm excited about it. So if you do want to separate yourself from the average optometrist in your area, can we say, doing research, having an extra degree does make a difference to how your patients see you, and it deserves to make a difference to how your patients see you. Because I can tell them that I'm doing a research project, and right now I'm looking at their tear film to see if they would qualify for that project perhaps. They find it much more interesting themselves, and I end up explaining many more things to them. And they don't necessarily understand all the parts of what I'm doing, but they find it fascinating and are very grateful that I'm doing something towards the future. For example, when I see my Sjogren's syndrome patients, they say to me, I see them both at the hospital as well as in my own practice, they say to me, what research are you doing now? Not because it will help me, but because I want the 30-year-old who gets diagnosed with this disease not to have to suffer like I did. So there's a real rapport you set up with people when they realize you're actually trying to do something to either prevent a disease or help to treat a disease. I can teach others how to do it. I guess learning the way to do it myself lets me teach others how to do it. You are all people who understand research, but what happened when we set up the special interest group in the academy called Fellows Doing Research, people would come up to me and say, you know, I've seen these maculas in these people, and I think I'm just going to write a paper and submit it. And I'd say to them, well, do you have an informed consent from these people for taking pictures of their maculas? And of course, they had no clue that that's what they had to do. So it's surprising what's not known about how to do clinical research. So if you learn those skills, both in the academic setting by getting a degree, as well as apply those skills by actually doing research within your own practice, then you will be able to transmit that knowledge to others. And that's a very, very important aspect of optometry and its future, because it's my belief that if we don't do good clinical research that informs practice, as David said at the beginning of this, then we are going to get lost and not be the people seen as primary care eye people. It's going to be lost to ophthalmology, and we are the people that need to do it and do it well. The thing that you don't know is that every chart is a treasure. I will also tell you that research is humbling. If you ever want to be humbled, do a chart review of yourself. And I want to tell you something. I think I'm this hotshot clinician. It is embarrassing what doesn't go into a chart correctly. Just because you're talking, and of course now we have to do everything on the computer, and I'm a lousy typist, PhD thesis with 2 fingers only. So it's not easy to get it down. I can't even draw anymore. At least in the past I could draw the eye, show where the stain was. I can't do that anymore, and I'm certainly not going to describe, inferior at 7 o'clock. I don't have time to do all of that. So chart reviews will humble you. They'll make you a better practitioner, because going forward, at least for the next while, you're going to do it so much better. And simply taking the time to look through charts and recognize that baseline observations are extremely important in understanding disease, extremely important in understanding the various ways that people move forward once they have a disease. I'll throw this out to you. We have no clue how many people with dry eye symptoms go on to be mild, moderate, severe, or simply get over it. We have no percentages for that, none. The paper that I gave recently about Sjogren's syndrome, somebody said, well, what about those dry eye patients? Maybe they were just pre-Sjogren's syndrome. We have no clue what pre-Sjogren's syndrome is. So these are concepts that people carry around in their heads and as clinicians that have no basis in fact, that have no basis in research. And we are the people that can bring that to light and publish that information, share that at lectures at the Academy or papers and things. And that's what the profession needs to do moving forward. So you interested people are the ones that need to do that. And it's there for the doing. It just takes your time, your interest, and a lot of enthusiasm, because you have to do it even when you're tired.
All right. So now we've maybe convinced you that you might like to at least consider some research in your life somewhere. What do you do? So your first step would be to look for resources somewhere, and there are a lot of resources. So at the ASCO website, there's a listing of what extra degrees are offered at each of the schools and colleges of optometry. Each of those schools and colleges of optometry should have some information on their website that talks about their additional academic programs that you can consider. You can look at the NIH website in terms of looking at the research that's funded by the NIH. You can even see people who have received K grants and such, so you can do some time looking in that. That's probably your own homework that you can do. Now, certainly all of you are at a school or college of optometry, and there's someone there that does some research. So they may not be doing research in an area that you think is interesting to you right now, but they can start to tell you about what the process should look like. And you then might consider staying at that place, or you might decide to go somewhere else to get an additional degree, or you might decide to take a gap year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years before you go and you come back to think about getting an additional degree. But you should ask questions. So whether it be somebody in this room, somebody here on the stage, somebody at a poster, ask them about their trajectory. Like, how did they get there? What do they think of it? What do they really like? What do they really hate? What's been beneficial to them? What's been really rewarding to them? And you're going to get a lot of different bits and pearls of information. And just like when you have different instructors in clinic, you like some things that each of them do. You sort of gravitate towards that, and others you might not gravitate towards that bit of information as much. You'll find yourself winding down a road. And I would say that everyone is here to help you. So ask questions today, tomorrow, anytime. If there's a person like Don Korb, Barbara probably didn't end up waiting his house, drinks and such, just because she gravitated towards him. And he saw that in her, I'm guessing, and asked her, showed her what that was like. So find your person who's going to show you that. If it's not at your institution, send them an email. I mean, I'm telling you, I've had students email me from all over the world, and I love it. It's like somebody's interested. Of course I'm going to help. So they will think the same thing. Don't be afraid. They're just an email address, but there's a person on the other end who'd love to talk with you or meet with you. I've written the third bullet, assess your personality and values, not to sort of say we all need to examine ourselves, but there are some good indices that will help tell you whether or not this is sort of a career that you might be interested in. As you've heard from all of us, there's a lot of variety that happens in academic life. You can be doing research one day, teaching the next day, and that's all very exciting. But if you're not that kind of person that likes that kind of chaos, then maybe this isn't exactly for you. Having said that, you can be an introvert measured on any of these scales and still learn your way to giving a presentation if it doesn't come natural. There are some learned skills there. So I think at some point in your young academic career, it's worth considering doing one of these surveys. So 2 that I've mentioned here. One is called the DISC, which is an assessment of how you communicate with others. So you get an idea of what your sort of personal strengths are in terms of communication, and that then can help you in your PhD if you go for that, or even just in your patient care. There's a free version of it that you can do online, and then there are also other versions of the Myers-Briggs Personality Index. So some of you might have taken it or know of that as well. But it's a good idea to have a sense of who you are when you're thinking about a career in research and what you like and what you aspire towards. If you're at a university that's part of a large university setting, there's probably an office on campus that can get you both of these surveys for either a reduced rate or free as a student. So it's worth, if you're at a major university, any kind of major university, through student affairs or even faculty development, they might have these sorts of options for you. I think that, less than 2% of Americans have a PhD, and sometimes it almost doesn't matter what your PhD is in. No one ever asks that. They say, oh, you have a PhD, and you say, yes. It's never like, is that biochemistry, or is that, what is it? It's almost like it really does, as Jeff mentioned, it just opens a door. And a master's is much the same, depending on, no one ever asks you, well, what's your master's in, unless it's a master's in something that has a letter associated with it. But they do demonstrate a level of commitment to both yourself, like I can do this, right, Barbara, as well as to the world, that you've taken an extra effort to do something special, and it really is special. Again, we've all said over and over, it's really important to find your mentors. Bernie Dolan was president of the Academy a number of years ago, maybe 5 or so, somewhere in that ballpark. And he talked about having a table of 8 in one of his columns for the Academy. And what that meant is, who would be the 8 people at your table that are mentors to you? And he said, before they pass on, you should tell them that they're at your table of 8. And so it's worth thinking about who your mentors could and should and would be, and don't be afraid to approach them and make that relationship, and then one day maybe they'll be at your table of 8. All right, so go out and take a look at those resources. We have a few minutes here where we can take some comments, questions that you all might have. Barbara and her group with fellows doing research, are you guys in the exhibit hall this year?
I think.
So, yes?
Turning people upside down.
Oh, you mean the booth?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yes, we are measuring IOPs, bottoms up, it's called.
Oh, boy. So even our organization here does a little bit of research, bottoms up. Cute. Do headstands, so when I see all the people doing headstands in the exhibit hall, we know what's going on.
Machines.
Tilt table.
Things.
So also you can see from these other pictures here, you can do basic science research as part of being an optometrist, or you can do babies and everything in between. Dry research, of course, is my passion. We have a mix up here on the stage. I'll take some questions, but important to note at the bottom, we are going to be sending all of you a survey, and the questions, you'll be getting a link in the mail, but email. And I know it's not text message, but please take a look at your email and go ahead, and when you get that link, fill it out for us, because it helps us to design future programs. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Any questions from the audience? Somebody has to ask a question. That's the other rule. Yes, ma'am.
This may be more for people who went straight into the PhD. Mm-hmm. Were you able to get involved with the Academy or any other optometric organizations while you were working on your PhD, or was that really hard to manage?
So I'll answer, and then Jeff can probably answer too. I was involved, I guess, in everything from forever. So when I was a student, I was AOSA president, national president, and I kind of loved that. So I carried that on. Getting involved in the local zone, so in Ohio was the Ohio Optometric Association, and they have a local zone, which was the Columbus zone. And I think probably Jeff and I went through all the chairs right away, right when we were in school the whole time. And so, yes, we were, you can be as involved as you want to be. You do have time. I mean, you have time while you're in school to explore those sorts of things and be as involved as you want to. It's really rewarding. Both the Ohio Optometric Association and the Texas Optometric Association now in Alabama, the Alabama Optometric Association, lots of opportunities for young doctors and students to get involved, because it's the future. So that's one element. Same time, I've been involved in many different levels at the Academy. You'll get asked on certain kinds of committees, so there's definitely ways to get involved. You do as much as you can when you can. If there's a will, there's a way. Jeff, would you?
I completely agree. We at the time, you couldn't get your fellowship right away.
Yeah.
There was a period where you had to practice, basically, and seeing patients before you could get your fellowship. But we got it as soon as we possibly could. And in that time, we were, of course, going to the academy, meeting people at the academy, networking through the academy, and then got our fellowship 2 years into our PhD program. But had been involved in student faculty liaison committee, lots of different avenues. So yeah, it is very, very possible, and I would highly recommend it.
You guys have anything? Great question. Any other questions?
While somebody's thinking of a question, my second tingly moment today at the Academy was standing at a poster being presented by a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
So you can get involved early.
Anybody else have a question? Yes.
Generally, when people speak of doing like teaching, being academic and like teaching and doing research, they always go hand in hand. In your experience, have there been people who just purely want to teach or just purely want to do research, and is that okay? Like, do you feel like once someone gets involved in one thing, they automatically have to do the other?
No, you don't have to do both. So I would say in my life, when I was thinking about what am I going to do with myself post-residency, I always liked the idea of being a teacher. So that for me was something that I thought at an optometry school. So I did the residency thinking, well, this won't close any doors if I want to go back and be at a school or college of optometry as a teacher. And then you start to learn about the wide world of research, and research kind of waxes and wanes depending on how much effort you're putting into it. And so you really can do both. And I would say in schools and colleges of optometry, those that do both are probably the most well-rounded. But there's some, like at UAB, there's some that are just clinicians, and they're overseeing students, attending, teaching some of the more didactic or clinical courses. And then we also have some faculty that do minimal teaching but are primarily researchers. They may be straight PhDs without an OD degree, the whole spectrum. So, I think that academia provides you the opportunity to find what fits for you and then look at different places where you could fit there as that Mark said that. It really is a nice matching of your skills and talents to a place that offers it to do both or all or more of one than the other.
And I'll give the example of a couple of faculty members who got their PhD degrees, were very interested in research, but ultimately decided that teaching was was what really energized them and excited them. So they went to the clinical track. They teach didactic courses and in clinic, even though they got a PhD. What the PhD how it benefited them is they can participate in research as they please, but they figured out ultimately that it wasn't something that they wanted to lead. So while they do both, 90% of their interest in their time is in teaching. And so they found out through academic process that was where their interest really lied. So yeah, you can do either.
Yeah, and I hope there aren't any of my new faculty in the room, but I'll repeat what I said earlier. I think anybody in an academic institution has a responsibility to move our profession forward in one way or another, and whether that's legislatively, whether that's clinically and developing our scope and how we practice, or whether it is in a wet lab. I think we have that obligation. But there are, as has been said, there's a range of contributions, and there's a number of ways that you should be able to advance your career, whether it's based on traditional research or other intellectual academic activity.
I did, if you don't mind, I wanted to tell you a little bit of difference in the curriculum or how you learn in graduate school versus optometry school. It's very, very different. You don't have a long list of classes that you have to take along the way. Instead, there are a few classes that you have to take, and then you decide what you want to take around that. So most of what you learn is exactly in the classes that you have. And not only are they classes that are in vision science in optometry, but you're usually open up to an entire university's worth of classes. So it may be that while you have some interest in vision science, you are primarily interested in epidemiology or public health. You can get most of your degree, like Dr. Nichols got a degree, or she got a master's in public health because she was taking most of her classes there. So not only can you sort of choose the classes that you want to take in the area of interest for yourself, but the classes are taught very differently. They're not lecture learn, it's more discussion based. So you're doing sort of part of the teaching of each other, not just being lectured to all the time. So it's a very different type of curriculum, a very different type way of learning. So if you are sort of at that point where you think, I can't sit through another 1 hour class where somebody's lecturing to me, it's different. It's completely different, and you have to keep that in mind.
And I would say also on that, depending on where you go, we have a lot of our graduate students at UAB who take courses in immunology or in the graduate school or in genetics and whatever it might be. That's not at all related to the School of Optometry, but it's their area of interest, and they want more information. They might audit the class, they might actually take that class or do a journal club in a different area. So you really get to pick and design with guidance what that program would look like. And I think that's going to be what your life is like anyway. You'll learn that in graduate school, a lot of what you learn is self-taught in a way, guided learning, I would guess. Yeah. But that's what your career would be like. All right, well, I think that we need to wrap it up. Please take some snacks with you, and I'd like to have you help me thank our panelists. Track us down if you want some information, please.